Hey there, kids from Foundations class. Listen, for the last couple of days, you've been multiplying. Well, we've been working with polynomials, adding and subtracting them. Then we spent some time multiplying them. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to take those ideas of multiplying and work in the reverse. We're going to do something called factoring. Now, in 8th grade, at the end of last year, you learned about factoring. And if you talk to Mr. Hawkins or you talk to any other teacher that's in an algebra class, they'll tell you how important it is to be able to know how to factor. Doesn't matter what grade we're talking about. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, even into college. You have to be able to factor. So we're going to take this unit kind of slow. Today we're going to talk about one type of factoring called factoring with a GCF. That is sort of what I would consider to be the reverse of distributive property. Now, what do I mean by that? Take a look at this example that I'm going to put up on the screen. Okay, I'm going to ask you to take 3x and multiply it by 2x squared. Let's put 2 here. 2x squared plus 5. Now, from the other day, I know that you're probably supposed to distribute here. Okay, 3x times 2x squared is going to give me 6x to the third. And then when I distribute the 3x also to the 5, I should end up with 3x times 5 is 15x. And now you've just multiplied. That's multiplying a binomial. Well, what we're going to do today is we're actually going to give you this expression and ask you to work backwards to figure out what was multiplied. That is what factoring is. The idea that somebody gives you a problem that already in a polynomial, an expression that's already been multiplied, and you go backwards and you figure out what two things were multiplied. That's factoring. That's what we're going to try to attempt to do today. How we're going to do that? Well, I'll show you. It's not as hard as it might seem. Okay, so I have a screen here that just kind of talks about what factoring is, but we just talked about it together. It's the idea that I give you this problem here and say, okay, something was multiplied and the answer was 6x to the fifth plus 9x squared. And your job is to figure out that these were the two things that were multiplied. That is what it means to factor something. Okay? And we say it's factored once you do that. Now, this might look familiar to some of you. You might be saying, okay, I remember this when I was in 8th grade. Great. If you do, you're one step ahead of the game. But if you don't, no worries. Let me talk you through how we factor using a GCF. Okay? Here's a problem. And this problem is the answer to some multiplication problem. So two things have been multiplied together, and the answer came out to be 12x plus 8. Our job is to figure out what the two things were that were multiplied. So the way that we do that is we look at all of our terms. Now, keep in mind, we have two terms here, 12x and an 8. And we ask ourselves this question. What is the common factor of each of these terms? Now, if you're forgetting what a common factor is, just think to yourself, what is it that can be divided into each of those things? What's the biggest number that can be divided into each of them? Now, if you said 4, you'd be absolutely right. So we say that 4 is our greatest common factor, or you heard me say GCF. Now, they both don't have an X to it, so 4 is our only GCF here. So that's one of the factors. That was actually a thing that was distributed. So to figure out what the other factor is, we just divide each of our terms by 4. When we do that, we end up with, well, 12x divided by 4 is 3x. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So 3x plus 2 must be our other factor. That's what I get when I divided that. So in the end, we say that the two things that were multiplied together were 4 and 3x plus 2. And those are considered to be our two factors. That's what it means to factor something with a GCF. You look first for the GCF. That's the thing that we're going to distribute, if you want to think about it that way. And then you have to determine what this piece is that we distribute to. And you do that by simply taking each of your terms and dividing by the GCF. All right, so that's your first one. Let's take a look at another one. Now, in this next one, they're both going to have variables, so we're going to see how we deal with that. Okay, so here's our example. Our example is 6x to the fifth minus 24x to the third. Okay, let's think about this for our GCF here. Well, let's think about first what's the biggest number that can divide evenly into both of them. If you said 6, you're right. Now, if you notice, they both have an x in them. One is x to the fifth, one is x to the third. In this case, anytime they have a variable in common, always take that variable with the lowest exponent. So x to the third is common in between both of them. Why is that? Well, because this has 5 x's, this has 3 x's, so they both have at least 3 x's to them. That's the way I look at it. Okay? So 6x to the third is our GCF, which means to get our other factor, we divide each term by 6x to the third. Okay, so we're going to be doing some dividing here. That's what this is. If you need to do it off on the side, do that. 6x to the fifth divided by x to the third should give me x squared. Those 6's will cancel. Negative 24 divided by 6 gives me negative 4. X to the third divided by x to the third, they're going to cancel out. So here's going to be my other factor. I put them together to come up with what the two factors are. 6x to the third and x squared minus 4. Again, it's the reverse of the distributive property that we're doing. All right, I'm going to let you try the next one on your own. It's multiple choice, so there are some choices there. Take a look. Let me erase my screen. Okay, give a shot at this next one, all on your own. Now, if you thought x to the fourth was the GCF, or you thought 7 was the GCF, that's good. But together, they're the GCF. The GCF is 7x to the fourth. And when I divide 7x to the fourth out, I get 5 minus 4x to the third is the other factor. Choice B, it is. Okay, now, one last one, not to take this video so long, but sometimes our GCF may have two different variables in it, like this one here. That's okay. You're going, well, there's no numbers. Yeah, but there is still something they have in common. They both have at least an A in them. So A would be my GCF. That's A to the first. That's the least amount they have in common. So A to the first. So A is my GCF. Divide by A here. Divide by A here. A squared B divided by A will leave me with AB. Here the A's will cancel and I'll be left with C. So A times AB plus C is my final answer. Now, if you want to check it, you could always go ahead and distribute this and see, do you end up with, when you distribute, do you end up with your original problem? If so, you know you've probably factored out the GCF correctly. Okay, that's it for tonight. Good luck.